welcome to Trackops. I'm your host today, Chuck Cox, and today I'm going to walk you through using case services to schedule events and tasks across your cases. So to get started with this feature, I'm going to head over to my settings, and I'm going to start with my case services. And you'll notice that I have a bunch of case services already in the system, and you'll notice I've got this schedule mode on my case services. And if I jump down to something like field surveillance here, you'll notice now that I have these three different options: none, primary investigator, and activity. By default, on any of my existing case services, primary investigator will be selected. And if I leave it under primary investigator, that means that when I select this case service on a case, that it will only be marked as scheduled when the primary investigator is assigned to the case. So once I assign my primary investigator to the case, then any case service that I've selected on that case that is set up to be under the primary investigator schedule mode, those will be marked as scheduled on the case. If I move it to none, that means that the case service will only be marked as scheduled manually. So me or a manager or someone of that nature would have to actually go into the case and mark the service as scheduled based off of some other metric. And if I go ahead and I move the schedule mode over to activity, that means the case service won't be marked as scheduled until the connected task or event that's waiting to be created for the service is then actually created on the schedule or the calendar, and the investigator is assigned to it. So basically, if I use the activity schedule mode, I'm telling the system, okay, this case service, it requires an event or a task to be assigned with it, to be connected to it. So for instance, field surveillance, if I have that service on my case, then basically I'm going to be scheduling a field event for my investigator to go out and perform a surveillance on the subject on the case. And that's going to require an event on my calendar. And so by selecting activity, that means that the system will prompt me to schedule an event or task based off this case service on the case and on my schedule. And when I do that and I assign my investigator to it, that's when the case service will be marked as scheduled. Okay, so now that we have activity selected as the schedule mode on our case service, we can go ahead and save it. And you'll notice that activity is now selected as the schedule mode on our case service for field surveillance. And what we'll want to do now is go to a case that has field surveillance selected as a case service. And if we go to the agenda tab now of that case to schedule an event or task, you'll notice that at the top it's letting us know that you have one unscheduled service on the case, and that's from the field surveillance service that we added to the case. And next to it, you'll notice there's this nifty new button here that says Schedule Now. So if you go ahead and click Schedule Now, it'll bring you to your schedule view in the system. If you're not familiar with the schedule, it is a way to see activities and availability across all your staff within a given week. So I'm up here November 8th through December 4th. On the left-hand side here, all my staff, all my vendors, and then each cell is representative of their availability on that particular given day. If I double click into a cell, I can create an event or task here on the fly. But what I can do now is on the right hand side here, I have this nifty unscheduled services. And this will list all the unscheduled services that I have across all my cases in my system. I can filter this a little bit if I want. And you'll notice that I can drag and drop this unscheduled service from this case now from the side view and into a cell and create an event or task on the fly, just as if I were creating one on the fly just regularly in the schedule. But now I'm actually taking an actionable case service that I put on a case, and I'm scheduling an activity based off of that case service. So here's the field surveillance, and I can drag and drop. I can create an event or task right on the fly. If I click continue, it'll bring me to my event creation. I can do this from the calendar view as well. So if I go pop over to the calendar view, on the right hand side you have your task list as normal, but you will also have another tab for unscheduled services. And what I can do is I can actually do the same thing where I drag and drop that unscheduled service into a cell here in my calendar, and I can create an event or task on the fly for that case service on that case. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I'll go ahead and save that event. So now I've got my field surveillance on the first. If I go back to my schedule view, You can see the field surveillance here on the schedule, and you can see now the unscheduled service has been removed from my unscheduled services over here because I've now created an event off of it. Now it's marked as scheduled. If I go back to the case, I can see from the agenda tab this field surveillance, and now the unscheduled service is scheduled. If you have any questions about case services, the schedule mode on case services, using the schedule, creating events or tasks in the system, feel free to drop us a quick ticket by clicking that help drop down at the top right. And from the drop down, you can click submit ticket and ask your question from there, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. Thanks again for using Trackops.